You know what? I could also, I have my own computer, and if I didn't log onto the Wi-Fi, I could just join Zoom and be a presenter. That's Zoom, and that's another way. I've done that before.
Okay.
That's pretty simple.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, why don't we try that? Okay.
So I admit, and then I have to give you. I would make you a co-host, right? Is the sharing on? Okay. Perfect. Okay, I just want to pause on the recording.
Oh, Adam. What are you doing? She doesn't like this? What? I have to watch. I don't know what I'm watching for, but I have to watch this. Hey. I'm watching very
All the
carefully.
responsibility. And all of a sudden, the little guys that come out.
All right, we're gonna open the meeting. Can you hear me on this? Yeah. Yes, we're good. So, we are being recorded a couple times. We are being recorded on Zoom. Will be posted on the website after the.
Christina,
not correct yet.
do you know how this is working with close?
And we're being recorded.
She told me people are gonna pop up.
Before
How do I
we
let them
begin
in?
tonight's meeting, I just want to remind people, again, that it's being
Somebody
conducted
touched
in
it.
accordance with the Mass Open Meeting
She told me
Law,
I had to let them in.
especially,
Somebody touched it.
specifically the Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 1825. We're going to ask that all members of the audience remain
You see them?
quiet throughout the
No.
meeting. And
Oh.
during any presentation, so this gives everyone an opportunity to be able to hear what's going on. I know that last time for Eversource, it was a little bit tough to hear. We've got 3 microphones up here, we've got another one we're passing around. I really appreciate people that sent in questions ahead of time. We received over 100 questions. We went through them for any redundancies, and sorted them by category. What we're going to do is, after the presentation, we're going to allow for our board members up here, representatives, to ask some questions. We will be going through the questions we have received from public, and if it's a question that's already been asked, we will cross off. We have so many questions, let me just show you this copy, that I know we will not get through all of them tonight. So this is what you guys said. It's like front, back, point. So we're not going to get through. I'm sure we will not get through all of them tonight. But if you have an additional question after listening to the presentation, at the end of the meeting, depending on what time it is, I know it's too long, we will open up and allow for some questions if you have something that hasn't been answered. If you are asking a question or making a comment, we're going to ask that you please come up and use the microphone if you're able to do so. If not, let us know and we'll figure something out for you. Let's see what else. I want to remind you that as elected officials, we remain neutral on some large scale things in town because that's our job, is representing our residents. And our plan is on September 22nd, tentatively, we will be having a special town meeting. There will be some non-binding questions on that meeting that we'll be asking you if you would like us to move forward with spending time and resources on fighting some of the proposed things, the BES systems, the solar power companies, and as well as. So at that point, once you have that information, we will then move forward representing what it is that you do as a business. I'm going to let Jack talk a little bit about that. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me okay? No? No? Do I need to, teach your voice? Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. So a couple things that I just wanted to say. open-ended ones, but, you know, like you said, about 101 different questions. And categorized around safety, or what is it, what's it for Blanford, around, you know, how this thing's gonna be built, questions about the business itself, you know, et cetera. So, the plan, what I would like to do though, is express my thank you also to everybody, because there were some really, really thoughtful questions in there. As someone who represents you on this board and represents the people I found, I just wanted to just throw out there some of the things that I've been hearing. So, to set the stage for, there's 100%, you know, there are people out there that are just passionate about renewable energy. And we need to acknowledge that. There are people out there that are densely against these three projects for various reasons. That's understandable too. So we need to understand that as a community. There are folks who have a real fear about this project. It has nothing to do about anything else but a real fear about what this is going to do to our community. And we need to acknowledge that, you know, especially around the fire challenges that we've heard out in the news, etc. I look here the same way that most of you are here for the beauty of the surrounding area. That's why I moved here 5 years ago. And there are folks that are concerned about what is this doing to the beauty of our community. And then there's others that have said to me, I don't want people dictating to me what I can do in my property. Why would I want to dictate to somebody else? I've heard that. And then there's others that feel strongly that the governor is behind this, the state is behind this, you know, this is our fate, we should just accept our fate. And I'm just laying out, this is the type of feedback I've received. So you know that there's different opinions and different thoughts out there. I'm here for you, we're all here for you. So even though these are opinions, on that vote, on September 22nd, when we're gonna have that non-binding vote, please show up and leave the neighbors to show up. The role of the select board then is to represent, and I want to make a point here. We're not doing this for vendors here. You don't hear this because I may say something different later, which is we're not here about the money. Okay? If we want a firehouse built, guess what? We're going to build it ourselves, and we'll put our tax money to work. Okay? Nobody on this committee gives a doggone about the money and what it's going to do to help us on the tax side. At this stage, we're at the early stages of this. But I just want to make that clear because there's this thing going on that, you know, this committee is only worried about the firehouse. Not true, it hasn't come up in discussion once. Okay? We're not resident experts here in all of this. The three of us are not resident experts. I'm the first to say it. What do I know about this? What do I know about solar? Nothing. I'm finding out I know a lot less than I ever thought with all the questions that we asked. So I'm here to propose to you something that I'd like to do. Listening to the board. I would like to create a committee. Because of our world here of open meeting laws, which is new to me, everyone, just so you know, I've been slapped a number of times on this one. We can't even meet to have a verbal discussion of any sort without scheduling it 48 hours in advance and sitting in the meeting together. We can't meet separately, two of us or two other ones or anything. We can't even have a discussion about it. Okay? That's the rule. Believe me, I've been told that's the rule. So the only way to move forward and have a really strategic plan as to how this town is going to go after this, we need a committee. I'm not a fan of committees, but in this world, you gotta have one. Okay? There's 3 projects involved here. Let's reiterate what they are. That has nothing to do with Eversource or the solar field. It is solar field, BESS, and Eversource, which is the expansion program. Okay. The committee that I'm hoping that we will agree to is 1 member from each. The fire department, the board of health, the conservation committee, zoning, the select board, and one or two residents who have a passion that want to be on this committee. But that passion has to be in wanting to understand facts. Okay? I would like to recommend that it's 90 days. We put this in a 90-day program. I don't, I would hate to see this thing going on for a year. We don't have a year. Whether the vote is for it or against it, we need a committee. Because we need to make sure that things are aligned either way. Okay? So on that non-binding vote, September 22nd, I say that the committee will move forward with a strategy and a plan to address the outcome of that vote. What do you think, Jim? The commitment for anybody who's on this committee should be no less than 3 hours a week. Each member will have a responsibility. So if you just want to be on the committee to provide a position, if you're not willing to do any research or anything, please don't volunteer. It's a fact-finding information responsibility of the committee. All of there is no way, guys, that we're going to get through 100 questions. And the reason why I say that is some of these questions are very thought-provoking, which means it's going to lead to another question and another question. So we'll do our best to cover as much as we can. And finally, I'm requesting that we speak with our treasurer and put about $200,000 into a fund for this committee to use. Each one of these projects will take lawyers. Each one of these projects may take experts, outside experts. I don't know what it's going to cost, but I don't want them flailing because they can't spend the dime. So I would like to put that in the warrant that's coming around. If we don't spend it, great, goes back into the pot. But I would hate to see this committee, really try to move forward if they don't have anything to go on. Again, these are 3 distinct projects. Now, there is funding available, and I would say, and we're very aware of that, because Christina has brought that to our attention, and I think someone from the community actually brought it to our attention. And we will go for that way. This committee's responsibility will be to go for that way to help us out. So you don't have to spend our own when possible. So I wanted to leave it at that. I mean, we can agree or disagree, but I, for one, have a very difficult time trying to execute against something with no strategy. And that's the reason we're bringing it to the board. Okay.
I just wanted to ask if there's a zoning or planning rep. We were here. Please come just have a seat at our table. I'm sorry. So that is the zoning. I'm not sure if it's here. Or here. Hi back there. I saw you. All right. Okay, there are also extra seats for those of you standing. If you want a seat, there are seats up here. So please feel free. I don't need to feel your back to stand. Just to quote Dave Hobson, we start as neighbors, we end as neighbors. We welcome Mission Clean Energy to go ahead and begin. Just throw this back to the screen. Sorry, that's okay. Are you good?
All right. Everyone hear me?
Everything's knocks. First, I just want to say thank you so much to the select board for putting this together. Okay, I'm gonna try to project. Not my strong words, but okay, how's that? All right. So I just really wanted to say thank you to Tom Blanford and the select board for giving us this opportunity to present, and really just reiterating what Jackie just said. Thank you so much to all the residents of Blanford for coming tonight, for coming remotely and submitting your questions. We really appreciate that, and we hope that this meeting is really an opportunity to give you more information about our project, our company, and hopefully answer a lot of your questions. Oh, and my name is Emma Riley. I'm the development manager and the project lead for this project at an Energy Center. I'm joined here with my team, our head of development, Audrey Copeland, our senior development engineer, Jack Hitchcock. And then we also have two representatives from Fire Risk Alliance. We're here today, Mike Ferreira, the technical director. And we also have James Caulfield, who will be presenting just after my short presentation to address all of the safety topics here. But I just want to get started with a little bit of the background of our company. So Mission Clean Energy is a national utility scale solar and battery developer. We have projects across the United States, from California all the way to New England, where we are today. We have a staff of about 30 people, full-time staff, and we have a management team with decades of experience that really are amount to the same amount of time that this industry has really been in place. We can get more into that if that's of interest. So just a background on this technology, what do battery energy storage systems actually do? So they serve a very similar function to a battery that you might be more familiar with, in that they store energy. The difference here, of course, is that our project is interconnected to the public power grid. So our project would be interconnected to the substation, the Eversource substation across the street on North Danforth Road. And battery energy storage systems store energy from the public power grid when there's a surplus of energy. So usually that's in the middle of the day, and there's not as much energy being used as is being produced. And then it's able to actually dispatch that energy when there's demand spikes. So that's usually the hours of 4 to 8 p.m. in the evening for warmer people are coming home, especially in the summer, turn on the air conditioning. There's suddenly a huge spike in energy demand and not enough energy being able to be dispatched. And so what battery energy storage systems do is really help smooth out that energy supply and demand over the course of the day. And it really helps prevent blackouts and brownouts from occurring, which has become increasingly an issue throughout the state, also in Western Massachusetts. And more of these projects are coming online here. There are over 100 in the state today that are in operation. And that's exactly to address this need in an increase in demand. We'll go more into that. All right. So our project specifically, it's called Hidden Energy Center. We named it because we're trying to keep it as hidden as possible. It's set back from the road and many nearby residences, designed to avoid any impacts to human health and the environment. That includes noise, visual, and we really optimized the design over time. So we've conducted field assessments, changed around the design just to make sure that we are avoiding any of those impacts here that you can see. There's a visualization here. This is just a rendering. And we really designed it to minimize the amount of tree clearing that would be needed and really keeping all the natural vegetation surrounding so that it really is truly hidden. So why here? Why in Massachusetts? Why in Vancouver? So there's a lot of policy pressure on the state side. Massachusetts just implemented a 5 gigawatt mandate to increase their storage procurement 5 gigawatts in the next decade. And that mandate is really driven by this energy demand increase year after year of the public power grid, Eversource, not being able to meet the capacity supply obligations because of this electrification of heating. It's largely driven by winter peaks. So this graph you can see just forecasted how exponentially the demand in electricity is going to increase over the next decade. And so these types of technologies are really essential. And that's why there's now a mandate to increase capacity to meet that demand. There are also gas retirements also driven by policy that need to be replaced by energy. And so that's also driving the need. So we have increased demand, decreasing resources to meet that demand. And so that's really when these capacity resources come into play. There's also actually a recent tax exemptions for data centers, so we can expect to see more of those coming throughout the state. I think there's actually one being proposed just in Westfield, very nearby, and those are very energy intensive. And so you can expect that energy demand will increase because of the prevalence of these systems, and energy storage systems are really essential to make sure that that demand doesn't exceed supply, and also to ensure that we can smooth that demand and supply, and that can also have a really good impact on lowering prices for ratepayers as this demand increases. So as part of that procurement mandate, there was also recently a climate bill passed at the end of last year. that offers an alternative permitting pathway through the Massachusetts Energy Facility Siting Board. Just last month, we actually just released its draft application guidance. Those laws, regulations will actually take effect in March for projects to apply in July or after. But we've actually started here. I've been working on this project for a couple of years now and done a lot of due diligence going through the local pathway. So as part of that process, we've completed a series of studies, including an environmental site assessment, our habitat and threatened endangered species field assessments. We did a tree inventory, a noise analysis, wetland delineation, and we sought consultation from a variety of people, including the former Blanford planner, Paul Martin. We had a pre-application meeting with the planning committee last February. And that was right at the time when Blanford was actually implementing this amendment to their ordinance that had really robust requirements, which are actually listed in this column in the center here of all of the studies that we would do in order to complete the application process. We also just last week met with Adam Dolby, our chief, and have also met with the Conservation Commission, which we plan to seek an order of conditions from. And that has a series of other studies that we plan to engage in order to submit through the local Conservation Commission for that under the state water protection. So just quickly, one unique feature of projects like this, which I'm sure a lot of people are aware, is that we participate in a payment in lieu of taxes agreement with the town. And right now, pilot programs currently are the second largest generating revenue source for the town. And this project, this figure here, 7.5 million over the course of the lifetime of the project, comes from a comparable project about 16 miles away in Holyoke. It's a similar project, a utility scale battery energy storage system that has an agreement here. But of course, that figure is something that would be negotiated with the town, and we come up with a figure that both parties are comfortable with and favorable to both parties. This is a really good opportunity that is revenue that goes directly to the town. It's not captured by state or federal. And we think it just would be a great opportunity. We really want to make sure that the host community is benefiting from our project in more than one way. This is just a little bit of a breakdown of what you could expect those funds to go towards. So a large majority of that is education, public works, and also the just Blanford government, which is what's funding the fire department. All right. Some of these slides we shared initially actually with our meeting in the Conservation Commission last year, our wetland delineation. We've actually since expanded our wetland delineation since that study that we presented back in December. We took that information, we adjusted our site plan, we optimized it to ensure that we're avoiding wetlands and any impacts. And that's the same for our site access road and also the generation tie line that connects our battery energy storage system to the point of interconnection, which is the substation. We also conducted a series of habitat and species studies over the course of last year, and there are no federally or state listed species found on the project site. And so we don't anticipate any impacts to habitat or species. There are some species that were flagged as likely to occur. They weren't found, but we would be in compliance with any windows if we're clearing, ensuring that we aren't clearing during any times where the migration times or nesting times. There are also two other state listed species with lower potential to occur that also are not found. We submitted our project to the NHESP, reviewed it, and they deemed the project doesn't occur within an estimated habitat for wildlife or priority habitat. And finally, before I turn it over to our experts, or I could turn it over to you. Yeah, okay, great. I'm going to turn over to our experts to speak a little bit more about the safety of this.
You have this like too.
I just want my back.
Does Emma just have to close hers out, or? Okay. I made you co-host, so you should be able to just share.
It's not you. Nice job. Nice job. Make sure.
All right, folks, good evening. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties here. So my name is James Caulfield. I work for Fire and Risk Alliance. Is that better? Yeah. Sorry about that. So my name is James Caulfield. I work for Fire and Risk Alliance. We're a fire engineering firm. Just so you know, I'm a firefighter. I'm not an engineer to my left. I have Mike with me. Mike's an engineer. I'm going to go a little bit about myself to give you an idea of why I'm here. We work hand in hand on projects like this all over the country. Primarily, I deal with risk and response as far as training firefighters on how to handle emergencies should one happen at a best. So just a little bit about me, again, why I'm here. I have over 20 years of service, emergency response, emergency planning, not only in the law enforcement field, but also as a firefighter. Again, training and response is what I've been doing for the last 20 years. That's why I have the pleasure of speaking to you folks this evening. So just an overview of the agenda, what we're going to discuss tonight, a little bit about battery energy storage, some of the failures, some of the things we've seen in the industry, and then we're going to probably get to the four main topics that everyone's concerned with: the fire, explosion, plume, and soil. So just a little bit about the battery system anatomy, so we have an understanding of what we're looking at. So we have a cell, and those cells, what we do is we place those into modules, and then as you can see, there's a rack. Modules get placed into racks, and then essentially those racks get put into what looks like a Connex trailer or almost the size of a shed. So when we see pictures, I want everyone to kind of have an idea of what's behind those doors so we can actually understand what we're talking about as far as response is concerned. Just again, you saw the renderings that we provided and discussed what the layout of the facility looks like. So when we look at the site, it's really three pieces of equipment that we're looking at continuously over and over again. So you're looking at the battery container, followed by the inverter and the transformer. So the purpose of the inverter and the transformer is to take that DC energy and convert it to AC. So whether it's going to be storing the energy or dispatching the energy, that's what the purpose of that piece of equipment is. And again, those batteries are contained and stored inside the container. Again, folks, this is kind of just for your eyes so you can kind of get an understanding of the picture on the left is a container, and the picture on the right would be those racks of the modules of those cells if the doors were to be open. So moving forward, we have an understanding of what we're looking at. Again, you were briefed and you were given some information as far as where this project was going to be taking place. This is nothing new. This is obviously your backyard. We're very, very familiar with it. So what I like to do at this point is I like to discuss some of the failures. I like to discuss some of the things in the industry that we've seen gone wrong. Again, as a firefighter, right, I want to be concerned and I want to know what my response is. So I don't like when incidents occur, but what that does is it allows me to gather data, allows me to gather information, and for lack of a better word, it allows me to sharpen my pencil as far as response. Because honestly, at the end of the day, safety is the most important. And your volunteer firefighters, your police officers, your first responders, their safety is paramount as well as safety to the community. So let's just take a look at some of the things that we've seen in the industry. If you were to take a step back and you're to Google some battery energy storage fires, I can guarantee you're going to come up with this incident from Lost Landing. The picture on the left is a battery energy storage facility. Again, this was a fire, and when we go a few slides back, we're looking at something the size of a shed. This fire that took place was an open design. It was a single room. It was installed in 2020, so that was before codes or standards were in place. So if you pretty much take 4 Home Depots and put them next to each other, Home Depot's a really good reference point for me because I go around the country and I think everybody's familiar with the size of a Home Depot. So picture those racks all across a floor of Home Depot with no way to stop propagation or advancing the fire. So I think it's important to highlight this incident because this is not the case anymore. This is not the way that we design these facilities, and safety has really come a long way as far as what is required by law in the industry now. So, like I said, we're going to discuss 4 main topics, but one takeaway that I like from this, and this is information provided by the EPA. For those of you, it's a little too small. I'll just kind of sum it up. The results from the hydrogen fluoride and particulate matter showed no risk to public health throughout the incident. And the smoke the facility has generated has greatly diminished. Again, this is public information. This is coming from the EPA. Again, we like to share it, and someone from me coming from the industry, I like to understand what goes on when there are events. You guys, I'm sure, get rain up here. So when we talk about water intrusion, right, we talk about, well, water and electricity, we typically don't go well hand in hand. So one of the things the industries have done is they've now made the containers IP66 rated, and we'll go into the next slide what that means. But basically what that is doesn't allow there to be any water intrusion. So that 1600 GPM, GPM stands for gallons per minute. So we flowed 1600 gallons per minute for 20 minutes on that container right there, and there was no water intrusion. Again, this is something that's industry standard at this point. So this is something that has to be in place when these facilities are built and the equipment is utilized. Community exposures. So there's a picture up here, and when I look at this, and I apologize it got cut off, but if you look on the top right, it says map length 1,397.18. That's feet. The next slide you'll see feet. That is our closest exposure. When we say exposure, we mean residents. So when we discuss response from a firefighting perspective, when we do these incidents and we train the firefighters, I need 100 feet around to keep the members safe and to handle a response. I travel all over and I've seen these projects cited in places where it's right at that 100-foot mark. So when you look at your site specific, you're almost 1,400, but you're 1,397 feet away. Again, these are conversations that I'll have in more depth with the fire department as far as response is concerned. But from what I see here, I have a very significant distance between my closest exposure, which will ensure safety. Again, this is going to be your second closest exposure, and we're not going to go through a whole list of all the homes. Just so you're aware, the second closest home is 1,411 feet away. Again, I need 100, so we're well beyond that mark. So fires and response velocity. I'm a visual learner myself, and I like to see videos. So I've got a couple videos that I want to show you. You don't have to be a firefighter. You don't have to be an engineer. But what this will do is it'll kind of put into perspective of the way we handle these incidents, if there is one. And again, the main thing we keep in mind is safety of the members of not only the fire department, the police department, but the community. So if there's any firefighters in here, all right, when we leave the firehouse, right, we have one job, right, we protect life. When I leave, if I go to a house and there's a structure fire, if there's somebody inside, I have to save them. That's why I signed up. My mother wasn't happy when I signed up to be a firefighter because now I'm running into harm's way. But either way, that's the job that I chose. So if you look at this picture here, one of the hoses is actually going on the adjacent house. If that house is in that condition, we've already lost that house. So our job is now to protect the adjacent property. And that'll make sense in a few more slides when I talk about protecting exposures. So again, our job is to save life and property. But what we're looking at in this situation, we're looking at property. Again, the safety of the men and women of the emergency services is paramount as well as the community. So just keep in mind from the response side. So it says intervention and containment. So let me just give you an understanding what that means. There's a picture there. You're going to see a hose string. It appears that that hose string is missing the fire. Well, that's because the hose string is actually not intended to put the fire out. The hose string is intended to cool that adjacent container, basically preventing the container from warming up or heating up to cause another incident. And we're going to explain the response tactic on why we handle things that way. And you're going to see in a few slides why fire suppression is not the key, is not the answer to these events. So cell failure. So there's two different failures. There are two different failures. There's venting and there's thermal runaway. Again, this is at the point where I tell you I'm a visual learner. I'm going to show you some videos of what that looks like. And then we're going to discuss it a little bit in depth so you have an understanding for what you're looking at. So we say this is a cell failure test, okay? Just so you know that there is charge, that number means that there is energy in the battery. So this is a cell venting, right? You're seeing a white gas. We're going to take a very deep dive into what that gas is, I promise you. So this is the precursor to thermal runaway. Thermal runaway occurs after a cell is venting. But again, I want you to understand, have a better visual when you see it occurring. So this is thermal runaway, okay? Again, we're going to discuss that white gas. Just keep in mind that the behavior of that gas is it's rising, and it's going to rise and dissipate and somewhat disappear. Again, that's just something that further down the conversation, I just want you to keep in mind with the response tactic. So we talked about ignition and submersion, and this kind of ties in the fact of when we talk about fire response and we talk about fire suppression, suppression meaning putting the fire out. So this is a cell that's in thermal runaway. What we're going to do, we did some research and development. Now there's a firefighter. We're going to take this cell and we're going to auto-ignite it, all right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to place that cell into a bucket of water. So these are the reasons why we say fire suppression is not the answer. So we've done an extreme amount of research and development, and folks, that battery is still on fire because of the chemical reaction that's occurring called thermal runaway. So the question is, when does that go out? Well, when there's no more energy left in the battery, fire goes out on its own. At that point, it is pretty much a very, very large paperweight. But again, once the energy has all been released, the fire is then stopped. When we suppress the fire, if that's actually a possibility, we actually extend the duration of the event. So when there's a fire, it's actually going to burn off that energy a lot more quickly. So fire, in our eyes, in this sense, is a good thing. And there's 4 stages of fire. And once fire is in decay, which means it's on the downhill, it's decreasing, it's essentially going to burn itself out when it runs out of energy. That's just to reinforce that at this point, there is no more energy left, which is what we call a zero state of charge. So I'd like just to kind of take one quick step back. When we put that cell into that bucket of water, the analogy I like to give is, I understand there's people that are much, much smarter than I am, and there's people who don't have a fire background. So I like to level set. If I were to go out to the car and take the valve stem off of my car, if I was to try to blow air into that tire, I would not be successful. So the reason for the response of the water is because we can spray water on it. However, because of the pressure coming out from that reaction, we're not going to be able to suppress that fire. So again, I just try to like to put things into perspective because again, I understand everyone's not a firefighter. Just so you can see how much pressure we're dealing with when those cells are venting. We live in an area up here, we live in a very good area. We always have the question of, well, what about forest fires? So there's different classes and types of fires, and this type of fire doesn't produce embers. Embers obviously are what causes your forest fires, wildland fires, and something that's also mandated with these facilities is something called vegetation management. So they're going to have to manage the area around it, to prevent that from happening. Plus, there's going to be a site set up and design that's going to allow the firefighters access to quickly and effectively navigate the facility if they were to have to go inside. Again, I don't want your firefighters going within 100 feet. But again, like I said, embers typically gets brought up, especially in a wooded area like such. So this would be an example of something that say at a 90% state of charge. Again, I like to say this where if you were to look at your cell phone and you were to have a battery at 90%, it's fairly full, which should actually most of the day. That is going to dictate what the response is and what how the fire is going to be seen. So a 90% state of charge is going to be a larger fire. On the tail end, a 30% state of charge is going to be much more minimal, so less fire. Again, as time goes on and that energy is being burned off, we're not going to see the same type of fire throughout. Explosions, right? And that's something that everyone talks about. They're always concerned with, all right, is there an explosion risk? So 2019, again, this is before standards, there was an incident in APS McMeekin. So in the fire service, we say the difference between a fire and explosion is 4 walls, a ceiling, and a roof. So gases can build up, that's an explosion on the bottom right, but a gas fire is seen on the top left. Anybody with fire service or fire background would much rather the top left one as opposed to the bottom right one. So again, we'll take a little bit more information from this event, the explosions and the lessons learned. So this is the event that we're discussing, and inside that door, there were racks. So in one of the earlier slides, you saw I gave you the Home Depot analogy. We no longer do that. Moving forward, they also used to utilize this setup where they would put those racks into small enclosed buildings. Again, folks, that's the way we're operating now is not putting them in buildings, we're putting them into containers. So again, something we've learned in the industry, but something when we talk explosions, there's also 2 other factors that have been incorporated. So you see up on the screen, it says NFPA 68 and it says NFPA 69. So those are 2 protocols that are mandatory in all of these systems. Either one, some containers actually will come with both. So NFPA 68 is a deflagration panel. So if there is a hydrogen buildup, the panels will open up off the roof, and those gases that we saw, which I promise you we will discuss, they will vent out the top. The second one is NFPA 69. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. That is an example of what the deflagration vents look like. The second one is going to be NFPA 69, which is a purge system. So it'll intake fresh air and it will purge out those gases, preventing the buildup, which is thus then preventing an explosion. So I don't enjoy incidents, but when I get the opportunity to take facts and to study things, it allows me to make better informed decisions and keep my brother and sisters, like my fellow firefighters, safe. So I like to give you facts. So here's a case we're going to discuss briefly. It's called the Escondido Battery Fire. Again, this is public information, folks. I'm not trying to give you anything that's not already out there. So if you bear with me, I'm going to try to go with the color scheme. Maybe that's like a orangish pink on the top left. So that's where the battery fire was occurring. There was a decision made to evacuate that entire purple area, okay? So I'm sorry, evacuation was the pink area, shelter in place was that purple area. So this decision was made off of fear and emotion, not facts and science. And I'm going to show you in the next slide, we have readings from that day. We did air monitoring, we conducted air monitoring to see what exactly was in the air. This was done at the fence line, right at the facility. So just keep in mind, this was a very large area affected. Again, evacuation was off of not facts. So here are the facts. So when we say fire department air monitoring, what that means is we were at the gate of the facility. So there's going to be a gate around the facility that you're going to potentially see here. And the only readings that we were able to obtain at that gate were 2 ppm, which stands for parts per million, of hydrogen cyanide. Now that sounds absolutely terrible. But if you've ever had a house fire here, burning plastic, which I'm sure whether it's siding or PVC pipe, these are things we see in house fires as well. So I will tell you this, there is no such thing as good fire. I don't care where it is or what it is, there's no such thing as good fire, but these are the details and these are the facts that we gathered from that day. So that evacuation really wasn't necessary, but we gathered some good information from it. Again, this is just some more data. Again, I like to provide QR codes for people to relate back to the information, and it's something that's out there. I'll let you do your reading at your leisure, but that sums up what the findings were. So we saw that video, we saw that white gas, as you can see here. But let's talk about what's in that, right? Because I think everybody in this room is concerned or questioning what that looks like. So there's 4 prevalent gases that we see in Excel or in the event. And the first one and the primary one is carbon monoxide. And I'm sure most of you have heard of it. If not, the carbon monoxide detector is available for your home. The second one is carbon dioxide, followed by hydrogen and then methane. So again, are there hydrogen chloride, hydrogen cyanide, hydrogen fluoride? Yes. Again, when homes catch fire, folks, these are the same things we see in house fires. Again, still a concern, but again, very much there. So let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into the carbon monoxide portion of it. So this is distance and dissipation. So what we see here is it's a car in a garage with police officers standing outside of it. So this is a case where the person got into their car, they started the car in the garage, the gases consumed them, and obviously there was, unfortunately, there was a fatality. But what we try to do when we explain carbon monoxide in this situation is when the first responders showed up to this call for service and they opened that garage door, they didn't harm the neighbors next door. They didn't harm the people outside on the street, right? The gases rise and dissipate. So again, there's some science into this, but I like to kind of give an understanding where everyone can relate to. So distance and dissipation is where we talk about how these gases behave and they rise and they dissipate. Here's just another picture of the plume behavior. As you can see, the gases are rising straight up into the air. Again, we've conducted tests at the fence line and we haven't found, you saw the results, I'm sorry, that we did find. So this picture kind of, again, from my perspective as a firefighter, as I look at the picture on the bottom right, and what I like to tell people is, I ask the question when I go teach firefighters around the country, I say, does anybody in the audience or firehouse have a 2-car garage? And sometimes I'll get people to raise their hands. And I say, you know, what do you folks keep in your garage? And the answer is, you know, everything your significant other doesn't allow you to keep at home. So when I look at this fire on the bottom right here, I don't know what I'm dealing with. I don't know what's burning. And I've been to, unfortunately, a lot of house fires, and typically the neighbors in the community are rallying behind the families, and they're standing across the street. So again, we're not sure what's burning, and I love the community support, and we need that. But the top left, again, I like data, the facts. I can understand what I'm dealing with in the top left as opposed to the bottom right. Again, no such thing as good fire, folks. And then this is just a larger scale. This is again Home Depot. That's a Home Depot fire, went to 7 alarms in California. Again, that scares me, right? Anybody here in any type of emergency services going to that is that's not a good day. It's concerning. So again, I like the known versus the unknown. So when we talk about application of water, we talk about soil. You know, the concerns for the community was, well, you know, my soil, you're applying water. We're not applying water to the container on fire, but the question arose, well, what if it's raining? You know, what if some of that water gets into the soil? So again, events have occurred and we've taken data and gathered facts. And again, I'm going to share them with QR codes. I really encourage you to follow up with information. So there was a fire in East Hampton, and I'm going to give you an example from the East Coast, New York, and then I'll give you an example from the West Coast in California. So this was a 24-hour deluge. So basically what that is, that sprinkler system ran for 24 hours nonstop. Again, this was before we were aware of what the response tactics should be for an incident at a best. And again, you know, this is public information. The governor released the information, and I'll highlight the bottom, for those in the back can't read it, just said, no reported injuries and no harmful levels of toxins were detected at the site of the battery storage fire. So that's just one of 2 incidents. Again, based upon the information, no evidence of off-site migration of contaminants associated with the fire. And the last one, this one was a fire that took place in California. And very early on, the EPA had showed up on the scene and they had made it mandated that the officer in charge was to contain all of the water that was utilized in that event. So just by that picture shown again, this was before our response tactics was what it is now. So they utilized 6 million gallons of water. That was a long duration incident and the water was contained. The chief and the members of that fire did an outstanding job. The EPA came out and tested that water and they ordered that it be released back out. There was no contaminants found. So that's just kind of 2 incidents from 2 different coasts we like to bring to your attention. I know I threw a lot of information at you. I tried to provide you with as much data that I used to build these presentations with. There's going to be a further follow-up and we discussed training. Your members, your men and women of your police and your fire service, can't thank them enough, right? It takes something special to do that job. The training that they're going to get, I welcome the opportunity to come back and continue to talk with the chief moving forward to make sure that they'll be able to handle these incidents without a problem, and safety being the number 1 factor. So ultimately, I really would like to thank you for your time and attention for tonight. And turn it back over to the board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dave. So I'm going to open it up to our boards now asking questions. So we have representatives from conservation, zoning, planning, security, and Board of Health and Fire up here as well. So is there anyone that would like to go first with questions? Over here. Colleen, thank you. So Colleen, Derek, thank you for this microphone. Mike, no, that was great. Yeah, Colleen, do you mind standing? Sorry.
Yes. Public speaking is not my forte anyway, so I certainly don't want to be standing in there.
Sorry, I apologize.
Hello? Better.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for coming. And you're Emma? Emma? Okay. So, I appreciate you guys trying to make us feel, not as frightened maybe as some people might be by this. And just to confirm, you don't work for Mission Clean Energy, you're a consultant.
That is correct.
Okay, good. And I think something that would help us, everyone feel a lot better is if we understood, we saw your great pipeline and what's in development, but exactly how many facilities do you have operational right now and what's the current megawatt?
Yeah. So we were formed 2.5 years ago, Mission Clean Energy, and it takes about 5 years to complete the development process for a project. That includes the permitting timeline, which we're working through, trying to work here for a couple of years on, and then also the interconnection process. So we've actually been waiting for ICE New England. This is a lot of information, but want to give you the information to finish their Q reform, which is held up the study of interconnection applications into the grid at this point of interconnection. We're about to commence that process. To answer your question, Mission, as our company does not have operational batteries, our leadership team, including myself, have been doing this for over 10 years. And I have a number of batteries that I've worked on, developed that are operational all over the country. We do have a list in this deck
and we're happy to follow up with that.
That'd be great.
Yeah, so, there's a little experience list there. These are projects that our team has worked on, batteries and PV. We have some other case studies and examples. I've worked on one of the largest projects in Arizona. It's a gigawatt battery that is used by SRP to power their grid. And that actually just became operational this year. I worked on it 6 years ago at a different company, so it just takes a
So
while.
I think sharing that with the boards would be super helpful.
Absolutely, and we've got some slides on projects that we've worked on and examples.
Yeah, anything you want to share with the board is helpful because we all get questioned by the residents, obviously, for a lot of reasons.
Yep.
And Emma, I know you came and presented on conservation and you did do a Zoom presentation. So since that time, we haven't seen any movement. I literally just saw it on this document and maybe found it wrong. But it looks like you have changed your plans significantly. And you've also changed the type of battery you're going to be using because you were previously going to be using the magnesium cobalt, I think.
No, we were never gonna use NMC batteries.
So, because I have heard, see, I used to have a Carnegie that had a magnesium engine block, so I kept hearing magnesium, and I was a little worried about magnesium. So maybe that was incorrect, okay, now Dick, who's our president, is unable to be here tonight, but he did ask me to ask you some very specific questions. And it seems like you kind of hit on some of those. You mentioned you wanted to go through the local permitting process, is that accurate?
That's accurate.
And then I just threw me off that you also mentioned that the EFSD board, you know, is gonna be, you can submit to them starting in, I guess, is it July next year?
Yeah, the regulations
So-
will be in place in March.
So do you know when you're gonna come back to us at conservation?
So we're working towards submitting the permit application officially to start the permitting process. We have not done that yet.
With Eversource or with?
Here locally, so we wanted to have this meeting. And we also wanted to do a future open house where we can also address questions. We understand there's a lot of concern. What we didn't want to do is submit, it's taken us the last 6 months, we've been working on studies for the site. So wetland delineation, species studies, things that are required by the best ordinance that currently is in place here. That was passed in, I forget,
September.
yeah, and so we've been working with that ordinance to do our studies to get ready to submit. In that process, we've heard that there's been more concern and emphasis, and so we wanted to come here rather than just submit it. We want to come here, have those discussions, have that opportunity, and then when the opportunity is right, when, you know, we will go ahead and submit, and our desire is to.
So no timeline, but we do appreciate you. with
Yeah,
this
I mean,
hand-holding of
and
this
really,
helpful.
we're ready to go, so we could submit tomorrow, but we.
Auto
wanted-
conservation and DEP.
So our plan actually is to first submit our special permit, there are a few more requirements, and then usually, or typically, what we've seen in the past is that those permits would be issued conditional upon receiving the order conditions from the Conservation Commission. But we like to receive that
So
initial
you need
feedback
the initial from whom?
from the planning board here. Yeah, for the
So
special permit.
typically, the way things used to work, and it's changed over the past year strangely, but the planning board would always defer to us and say, have you gone to conservation yet? Are there wetland concerns? Because they like to hammer those things out first and before they give their approval. So you're not the only one that has kind of changed the process a little bit, so it's not an accusation, I'm just saying it's a little odd because, and I don't want to speak for you, but typically you come to us and you should say, is there a problem? Is there anything we're worried about with conservation?
We do that if we haven't received the actual application. And I believe that Paul has already spoken to you about making certain that you go to conservation first before you file the original application for permit. So that I mean, that's.
Yeah. So see, she's saying the opposite of what you had just said. If you
Yeah.
want to go to planning first, it's preferable. I'm just explaining the process in this town, which is very small. Okay, great, you're gonna be doing local, we do appreciate it because it really lets us understand and be able to expand our.
Yeah, I just want to add to that, so that was, we came to the Conservation Commission and had that meeting in December upon Paul's recommendation, and typically, I think we would pursue the conservation commission for that application itself, if following that meeting, if it was deemed to be triggering out the federal nexus or something, but our strategy and our design optimization is really to avoid any impacts altogether.
So
Trying to-
Ethan's not here tonight, right? Ethan, who's your
He is not.
permitting manager. So you're not expecting to trigger any FEMA,
No, exactly, and
no
so,
federal?
that's our,
Good luck.
thank you.
So, I would again like to state that I think it will save you some time if you come to us first, because we can really help you. And, you know, we want to understand what you're doing, and I don't know if you're aware, but that is all watershed. I know you moved your plans, which is great, you're not going, you know, over the feeder of Eagles Brook now, which we can Cobble Mountain, but Springfield watershed is very interested in this project as well, so we really strongly encourage you to come to us first.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I have questions from Dick, so I have to bear with me. And you talked a little bit about the containment systems, but are you gonna do any containment, like not having to do with the containers, but in the field itself, like berms or dikes or any of those types of things in case of runoff?
So you're concerned with runoff in the case of some kind of event, or just generally stormwater?
Oh,
Okay, so for stormwater, we're working through our plans on the site. We'll have to do SWIP, the stormwater.
SWIP, yeah.
So that will include all
that's
of
probably
those.
gonna trigger some of those other things you're trying to.
Yeah, and I will actually hand this over to Jack, who's our development engineer. So he's working on the site plan and all the things that we need to both submit the application formally, or, you know, obviously there's some more discussions here, as well as SWIP requirements. So if you want to speak to that, and then on the other topic, we can talk about that in a minute.
Okay? Yeah, so I'll give you a brief summary. We're planning to submit a SWIP, which will include an erosion and sediment control plan, as well as a stormwater management plan. Erosion and sediment control will make sure that we don't have any sediment and runoff related to construction activities, and then our stormwater management plan will ensure that the pre-development and post-development drainage matches, so we're not adding any additional runoff to the wetlands surrounding the project.
Great. And we look forward to seeing that.
Yeah, and that will be prepared by a Massachusetts licensed civil engineer.
Yeah, and are your wetlands delineated, that brings up another question, the wetlands delineations you're doing right now, are you using the Massachusetts wetland?
Yes, it's been completed, it was done by West.
Okay,
And I think, and that is, just to address your question, has a slide on this, at what we're doing with the SWIP itself.
yeah, if you, like I said, I literally just saw this new plan, and it does significantly deviate from the power plant that you had, Sandra, so.
Yeah. We delineated it only a portion of the site originally,
Yeah,
and we found that our site was impacting some of the wetlands, so we moved forward with delineating the remainder of the property, and then located the site based on the results of that full delineation to make sure we were minimizing any of our impacts.
so I know these LFPs are heavier, which is one of the reasons that, you know, sometimes companies tend to stay with them, they're much safer, they're less volatile. So you guys did soil surveys related to this?
We haven't done any geotechnical survey yet, but that will be part of our process before construction.
Okay.
for sure.
We do, just chiming in, we do,
Use local soil maps and resources when we're looking at projects to think about soils early on. So we did do that here.
When you moved though, so when you guys moved your plans from December to now, you're in a totally different zone with totally different soil composition. So I just wanted to let you know. Okay. Are you planning on having any local support for this station, monitoring, those types of things? Are you gonna have a local presence
So.
after it's done?
Yeah, so we will have a local response plan, and we'll have a representative here that can respond within 24 hours to various things that can come up. Typically, what we're responding to is that we've got part of the system is not operating as optimally as we like. This is not a safety event. This is like, there's battery cell not doing what it should do. And then we will come in and we'll replace that. That's the most common kind of thing that can come up. And then we're monitoring this 24/7 from remotely. So we're we have both a wired connection, a hard line, as well as cellular technology down to the level of the cells within the battery enclosures. And we're gathering data constantly on performance. And so we have a battery management system that manages each individual enclosure. And then we have an energy management system that layers on top of this that is looking at the entire operation of the system in real time.
And how do you access that remotely?
So
I work in IT, so it depends.
Yeah, so it is gonna be a web-based, you log in, you will be able to get access to that. It is actually something that some communities want access to, it's something that we can talk about down the road as part of the emergency response plan, but it's primarily used for operations and maintenance.
So potentially, if you gave us access, not that any of us, I don't want to speak for the whole town, but want access or ability to shut down. But I know that some of the problems that have come up with the multiple fires that have happened is the response is not immediate if there's an emergency. And if you have a 24-hour response, if you're having a problem with your systems, but what about an emergency response? Or is that primarily fall on the fire department?
So we work with the local fire department and for those types of events, we just started discussing this topic. I think Wednesday, last week, yes. We've had very initial discussions about what that emergency response plan would look like. We shared templates from other communities as examples, and we would work with fire chief and, okay, there we go. We work with the fire chief and staff to further develop those plans. And so that would include things like what is the typical protocol, right? From the presentation, we were sharing examples. There's really been a handful of incidents of these types of batteries having issues today. And what we've learned from those is that the best strategy is to let them self-consume within that individual enclosure. So they're all in these enclosures that are separated. And so the fire strategy isn't to pour a bunch of water. The slide that we showed was really about the soil testing because that particular battery deploys water. But the typical strategy is you let it do its thing in the enclosure, because actually sending the emergency personnel inside with the fire would be a riskier event. So typically, the emergency response plan isn't saying you need to get out there within 2 minutes. There's no one on the site. There's no one physically occupying a occupied structure somewhere here. And I know my fire folks here can talk more about that if you have more questions. But that will come a little bit later in the process.
So is this project contingent on the Eversource substation expansion that's currently before the state?
No,
Because you mentioned that, are you aware of what the output is for the peak output right now for the substation?
we are aware of the peak output.
What is that?
So it is approximately, we're just going over it again this morning, approximately 200 megawatt peak output at this substation at the voltage we're connecting to. So there
Yeah,
are.
well, if that were the case, Eversource would be jumping for joy because they came for a meeting 2 weeks ago. And what they're saying is their peak output and their anticipated peak output is either 11 megawatts when they were approved in 2024, or now they're saying it's 24 megawatts. So
There's more than one voltage in the substation. So there's a 115 kV line, and then there's a much lower voltage, what is it, 23 kV. The 23 kV system is serving a different project need, and it does require an upgrade of the transformer in the substation to facilitate that.
but right now, that substation only furnishes power for 1,000 residents. And the current peak output is what I was learning here. So it just seems like a little bit of overkill if it's to stop brownouts, which we don't have. We here in Western Mass and in Blanford don't seem to have those rolling brownouts that you talked about. So I'm wondering if it will also be used for gathering, distributed and generated energy like solar and things of that nature.
We're not using this for solar. We're not planning a solar facility here. This 115.
Not you, others.
Sure, it's a great question. So the grid is an integrated fabric of pieces, right? I call it the highways of energy. as an analogy. And substations are your on-ramp, and then things move along that channel of energy. And then there's energy that flows off at various points as it needs load. So in a state this size, which is a sizable state, sort of, but maybe not as big as Texas, right? The grid is very connected. And so this 115 kV line doesn't just go here and stop. It flows through an entire corridor of energy usage in this western region of Massachusetts. And so this will store energy. The electrons don't care where they come from. They come from various places.
I think the people in the town cares where,
Yeah,
we,
right.
we wanna make sure that our town is stable and support the town and support the other 8,000 residents that, that are supplied by this. But we don't necessarily, we already have 37 megawatts of solar, which is, we have 2 of the largest solar facilities in Massachusetts right now. And we already have battery storage associated with those. So I think the residents would feel more comfortable if they understood what the intent really is, because the system right now has a 25 megawatt and a 35 megawatt transistor. Their average source substation is suggesting that they put in the 62.5 watts transformers and replace those. So I'm just trying to figure it out.
What we can do as a follow-up is follow up with the substation topology, which shows the 115 kV and then the separate 23 kV that's serving the more local load here. The grid, again, I'm trying to kind of explain, it works as an integrated system. And so when there are big storm events and there's big events, the power comes from typically not just within the community, although you do have some solar here, which is helpful potentially, depending on one's viewpoint, but you're connected to other sources of generation throughout the state, right, that are serving larger corridors of usage. So it is all one integrated grid. When we see really bad storm events in various places, this is one purpose of the battery, not the only purpose. But these batteries get deployed, they can sometimes be the only source of energy that is operational during those times.
So I think that's what we need to have in the PowerPoint. Those are the things that we need to share with the town. And I have no more questions for you, except to again say, please do come to conservation first, because it will really help planning when we get to them. So we have
Thank you.
interest from the people. We're looking forward to meeting with you in person next time, not on Zoom. Gotta come back.
Great questions, thank you. And then do you have questions for planning board?
Thank you, a big thank you.
Sorry, I'm gonna make you go closer to that microphone.
Already. One of the things that I wanted to ask Colleen.
Sorry,
One of the things I wanted to ask Colleen, is they've been waiting for a while to do this. And trying to help them along with what our needs are, what we need from you for information. And we're asking them to go to conservation first, which is terrific because it's gonna end up there anyway. And rather than writing responses to both of us, it would be.
sorry, Edna, can you go right up to it? Like, it's gonna be annoyingly close, I apologize.
It would be in our best interest if conservation was able to answer their questions first to our back and forth, and have a decision made. Colleen, what do you anticipate the time frame for something like that?
Well, they're just,
Sorry, I gotta go back and forth.
that's really up to them. They just started working on their script, so I don't, I asked what their time frame was and they weren't sure, so I can't tell you. Do you know what your time frame is to come to conservation?
Our timeframe was first to go to the planning department, so.
Now that that plan has changed clearly.
I can
what is your
tell you
new time
much
frame?
sooner, as soon as the end of next month.
And the
With
next one?
with some refiguring of our current development plan, but to give you a recommendation, that is probably as soon as we can.
Yeah, that'd be great. Just keep us posted.
Okay, we have times for responses and things like that, and when we get going back and forth between departments, it can get stall our processes and so, thank you, Colin. The other things were fire related for our board. They were more interested in that, so I was very glad that you had already met with the fire department. And if the fire department wants to combine her again, I'm gonna take that mic.
I'm switching.
Thank you, Bethany.
Gonna juggle a little bit. Okay, thank you. I don't have a ton specifically on the fire side. I think the suppression issue is largely resolved by the containers themselves. I'm a little bit more curious if you can talk a little bit about, you mentioned there's a vegetation management plan that goes along with the facility. Can you talk a little bit about enforcement of that plan, penalties if the plan's not met, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so, you know, we will have a decommissioning bond in place for the project, but that's more about system removal. We'd be happy to explore with, the town, something around management that provides more of a stick if it's needed around that, for enforcement. I think that may sort of be where you're going. So we're open to that. We also have, you know, these projects, there's an interest obviously in public safety, and we also have obligations under the conditional use permit. There's liabilities for us not to manage appropriately, but we can absolutely put in place something that provides a bit more assurance around that.
Okay, yeah, appreciate it. I was also curious, one of the issues around it was the way, whatever the technical term was, to mitigate the venting of gas out of the containers. Can you speak a bit to if that's a triggerable event and what that process sort of looks like?
We put musical chairs too. So just, I'm sorry, clarify as far as if the deflagration panels or the purge system is activated, are you required what?
Then what? Yeah.
What you're, so the alarm system would then activate, which would then trigger response to your agency. Again, moving forward down the line, conversations will be had. When do you want to be notified? Do you want to be notified for a fire alarm, for a smoke alarm, for a hydrogen alarm? So when we build out that process down the line, if that's something, and in a case like that, that would be something you would be notified of. Alarm system would make notification, and then however your dispatch system works here, your agency would be notified for response.
Do you guys have reporting on statistics for how often those types of whatever a triggerable event would be in that scenario for these kind of build-ups?
So, yeah, Mike's the engineer, can go into a little bit more statistical data. I'm more of a response guy.
Oh, me too.
So I wanted to point out, just when you talked about probably 6 different events, and gave examples of plume, water on the fire. Those are basically 6 of the 7 events that happened in the US in the past 5 or 6 years. Just coincidentally, irrespective of this project, I just completed, the project manager on a review for the American Clean Power Association. They wanted an independent review of fire events that had happened in the US. We looked at what the information in the public domain, we looked at information from the Electrical Power Research Institute database, and we basically summarized 7 events. That's the extent of what happened. Some of them are outliers. The Moss Landing event, as you can see, it was indoors, it was wide open, aisle containment of open batteries. When you're talking about the containerized 30-foot battery units that we're going to be having here, there were 3 or 4 events. Each of those events involved one container. There were a couple of events where the earlier model containers were too close to one another and involved the adjacent container. They've gone from what used to be allowed 4 to 6 foot spacing. Now industry standard is 10 foot spacing. The idea being that if an event happened with one container, it would stay to one container. So even if there was some delay with the fire department coming out, the event would stay within one container. One of the reasons why we show the anatomy of what happens in the container is you could look at this and say that's one big battery. It isn't. It's thousands of small batteries arranged in modules, then racks, and then units. So there are a lot of different safeguards, temperature management, things like that within the battery software itself. If they sense any overheating, the battery will shut down. So there's so many safeguards that when a fire does happen, it would be expected under today's regulations, UL and National Fire Protection Association, that it would be limited to one container. So of all the events we looked at in the past 5 or 6 years, and most of the batteries have been built to respond to the demand of the grid within the past 5 or 6 years. So it's not like we're just cherry picking the most recent events. 90% of the capacity has been built in the last 5 years. It's expected to even double in the next couple of years. Just some raw statistics, there are 900, we just did to pull this number to the end of 2024. There are 900 BESS facilities throughout the US. All of them have different numbers of containers, but if you look at it, there's probably anywhere between 25 and 35,000 individual containers of 30-foot containers, and we're talking about 6 that have fires. So it just gives you an idea of the probability involved because of all the safety requirements that have been developed over time.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you to, if you have, you don't have to have it right now. Realizing the fire is kind of the worst, the highest escalation of an incident that's happening. If there's off-gassing, if there's venting, if there's whatever sort of triggering event, you have statistics on how often those other things happen versus just when there's a fire.
So the one event that happened in Surprise, Arizona, there was no explosion venting in the container, and what happened is the fire department approached the container, the doors actually blew open, and there were a couple of fire department injuries. Since then, they've required you either do NFPA 69 system, which is active ventilation to keep the concentration down so the explosion never happens, or an NFPA 68 system, which is a passive venting system. And although those are required on all new systems, we weren't able to find an incident in the literature where those vents had actually deployed and blown open to vent the fire. So there is a fail-safe for belting suspenders, but actually since they've been required,
Shifting gears just a little bit, I'm a startup guy, so you guys are essentially a startup. Not even essentially, it's a startup. Can you talk a little bit about corporate structure, venture backing, financial stability? Understand there's bonds for removal and things like that. What happens if the regulatory environment changes? Can you speak to all that? Not the regulatory environment, but other change probably.
Well, and there have been some changes at the national level. There's a few questions in one. So I'll deal with corporate structure first and then talk a little bit about some of the things that relate to batteries and the thing we're talking about tonight. So Mission Clean Energy, yes, we are a startup. In our space, we're about average size for a development shop. So we have a headcount of 30 people. We're working on projects all over the country. We have CEO and COO are the founders of the company. We also have an major investor, which is Wafra, which you can find on our website. And they are a private equity company that invests in large companies all over, and companies such as Mission, startups, and others all over the globe. So that is how we're, set up. Among our leadership team, I'm head of development, so I manage development. We also have our VP of engineering, our VP of project finance, and we bring collectively years and years of experience. I've been doing this for over 10 years, starting with some of the very first batteries in California that were actually installed as a response to taking the nuclear plant offline. That's not too far from me. San Onofre, and with that came more escalations in energy and the need to put batteries in place to manage some of that. So it ended up being kind of a helpful element in California as we move towards more renewables, less nuclear, and we needed some batteries to manage some of that shift. At the national level, we're in a really interesting time. We've had some changes to renewable incentives, and yet it still is one of the lowest cost forms of energy to deploy across the United States, even without that incentive. And we're living in an environment where we have AI and data center growth, and these data centers need a tremendous amount of energy. We're seeing graphs that are just projecting just tenfold increases in just a year in various parts of the country due to the data centers. So you have converging pieces of retirement. Some of those are planned. Some of those are actually just units that have reached kind of their kind of end of life, and folks maybe not wanting to repower with coal or natural gas or some other forms. Again, this is just the lay of the land. Some places those are more favorable, right? And so you need some source of energy. You have growing energy, and then we have energy storage in the big beautiful bill. Energy storage incentives have actually remained in place through their original expiration, and so those have gone unchanged for standalone battery storage. That was a lot, just sort of labeling.
And just sort of finally for me, my understanding is we're pretty early still in the process, right? This is a facts gathering mission. So all kinds of questions will come up later, the specifications of the containers, all kinds of training issues and things like that. So for sure, we'll talk about those ideas.
Absolutely, yeah, and our plan here is to hopefully continue to work with you as we're working on the permit application, whatever education is required. We've got experts we can bring and have those discussions.
Jennifer, do you have questions for Board of Health?
I'm just curious to know.
You're gonna have
I'm just curious to know, and I think you touched upon it, is the EOP policy or procedures, that's not complete yet, is that correct?
That's right, the emergency response plan we worked to develop, is that what you're referring to?
Yes,
Yeah.
and how soon before that will be done?
So we typically finalize that once we've made the final equipment selection and we have a final design. So that's during the building permit phase. We can come up with a solid draft, but it's not final because we don't yet have the building permits. We don't have the site design in place for the project.
Can we get a copy of the draft?
Yep, we can. We've shared we've shared a few examples. At least one example. There's a generic ACP one, which is the American Clean program that provides information, and then we also have one that we provided that's an example from another location. Keep in mind that location has a different structure of their local fire department, their response, many different things, right? And so we can get as far as a very robust draft that's almost final, but it would not be final until we've made that final site plan and equipment selection. The building permit is not the same as this permitting process we're engaged in now. Just if folks are curious, that typically happens with the final stages of design.
Okay, we just happen to have a list of items that we'd like to see in.
Sure. And we're all ears for what those are and incorporating them. One thing we can do is attach a draft to whatever thing is approved with something that says update with final layout. I mean, there's ways we can get mostly to the finish line to provide some assurance before we have that final site design.
Okay, thank you. When you're in the permitting process and you're going to conservation first, can the get a copy? Formal application of the same thing so that we're able to step in.
Yeah, absolutely. We're whatever we submit can be shared with whomever, right? So since we're reversing the order, we'll share it with both parties. I mean, we want to make sure that that is appropriate for your local procedure, right? As long as it is, and if you want that, we're happy to share.
And the other thing I wanted to ask about was probably in one of those slides that we do get asked about was, are you going to have a hard surface under these trailers? Is there going to be concrete? And what is the composition of the floor?
Yeah, so again, that final composition comes out of final engineering. And here we'll have a concrete slab under the battery unit itself throughout the site. We're not paving the entire site. We are just under the units providing that structural board. In some locations, we do pier foundations, which is essentially like a large concrete post that we put along the perimeter. We do like several of them, you can kind of imagine. These are, you know, they're modular, they look a little like shipping containers, and so we can affix them to the ground, or we can do the pier structure. And the final choice there comes out of the geotechnical review and the best strategy for the site for the foundation that we like. Again,
I think you'll need that information for the SWIP.
that is true. You're right. Yeah.
So that will be one of the first things that we'll actually decide.
Okay, thank you very much. I've been going through, I've been going through the questions that were sent to us. And we feel that a lot of them were covered. So what I would like to do now is open up to residents here. Oh, did you have something, a question as well? Sorry. Okay, I didn't know. Sorry.
All right, you have the nice people, now you're gonna meet me. Please, I never crowd. Hey, I just wanna know, we got a notice from the state that they're gonna supersede all our zoning and, planning commission and all that, our bylaws. And now you're here telling us you're gonna work with us. I don't understand, all right, and I'm just a simple person. I don't understand. You go to the state and then you come here and you talk nice with us, and I went on your website. I could not find a chain of command. All I found, and I spent 2 hours, one commercial after the other, how great you are, and all this. I'm a common person. I follow the money trail. It always brings you to the truth. Okay, so what I'm getting at is, first, I would like to know why it was necessary to go to state before coming to us. And the second is, you're shaking your head. Someone went to the state because the state notified us.
We have not gone to the state with this project with any formal application. I don't know what the state sent. We've not submitted anything to the state.
That was what? Eversource went to the state. Now, this is where it gets confusing, and we all, okay? You're doing this out of the goodness of your heart, so to speak. There's money involved. No, you're not working with Eversource. Eversource says they're not working with you. The article in the newspaper on our country journal said, yes, that you are working with Eversource. You're not working with the solar, but you are working with the solar. I mean, all we want is a simple truth here. What would bring you to Blanford if it wasn't for the solar, if it wasn't for Eversource, wasn't for the crisscross lines down here by your lake? I mean, why Blanford?
Yeah, so, great question. We are not working with the solar plant. We're not working with Eversource. We're tying into the 115 kV transmission system that is separate from where the solar is connected and from the Eversource project that I believe has come up in this community. What our intention is and how we actually generate revenue from this project is we participate in the ISO New England capacity market and energy market. So here in this entire region, which includes multiple states, ISO New England, I'm sure you're well aware, I know everyone here is well aware of who they are. They manage the grid system, and they manage the overall power capabilities of the grid system. And in this market, a generator like our project can connect and participate in that same capacity market and energy market. And so that is one potential revenue plan. We also have the opportunity to participate in resource solicitations. What are those? Eversource, all of the load serving entities have to maintain a certain capacity level in their area. And so they also will, they will ask for proposals, request for proposals for resources. Those resources can range from, all different kinds of technology. But in our area, which is grid connected, front of the meter batteries, different from behind the meter, different from smaller solar, there are different programs in the state for those. Our plan is to either participate in the capacity market, the energy market, and the ancillary services, which are the small moments in time where there's generation source that we generate revenue from that, or to participate in RFP with one of these low turbine entities.
So then, what is the benefit to Blanford being the host community?
So, these projects, I was explaining that the grid system is interconnected. It's relatively small in the state of Massachusetts in terms of the connections between different lines. So when there are large events and there's outages in the winter, it doesn't just impact one small portion of the grid. It is the entire grid that needs to stay online and operating. And so these projects play a role in keeping the lights on, keeping the capacity that is required, capacity margin in the market is designed to keep everyone's power running in the hottest moments in the summer and the very coolest moments in the winter. And so these projects contribute to that grid system reliability throughout the entire grid, including the local area.
Now, well, again, my question, what's the benefit for Blanford? We get power outages because the lights are, the lines are down or something like that, so that has nothing to do with the battery storage. So, from what I get, over a 25 period, we're probably looking at $7.5 million to help the town. That don't build us a fire department. You've seen our fire department up here. I mean, if you have a battery fire, to get any reasonable support, we have to go to Westfield, maybe even Springfield. The response time is ridiculous. So my concern is that this gentleman here said that, he's going to work with our fire department. Well, we're volunteers, okay? I mean, they spread out the power. We're lucky. We have a very good first response team. They're there within 10 minutes of an emergency. Now, you say that you're going to be monitoring these battery systems from down in Westfield somewhere. So what's the time frame? You get a warning alarm, you have to digest what it is, figure out what's going on, and then how long is it before you contact our fire department? And then for the fire department to get a reasonable team together, that's going to be another timeline. So, I mean, you're scaring the hell out of me.
Okay, so there's a couple of pieces to this. First, on response, the strategy is not to send people inside the BESS enclosure to put water on it or to open it or touch it. We want to keep people away if there's a fire event. So the fire response tends to be, and it's written into the ERP, what kind of notification is required for the local vicinity by the fire department or fire chief. And so that's something we work out. Separately, and this is something we've done in other locations with volunteer fire departments, not the only place in the country that has that construct, is we can put together an agreement of some kind that supports the local fire department. We've not had substantive conversations on that, but we're more than willing to do that. And that really is about just having truly that comfort and having that ability. If there is something, you can notify the neighbors and those things can take place. It's also really trying to contribute the best we can to communities to support our project and also whatever other kinds of needs are in the area.
Yeah, this is going to change the whole infrastructure of our town and in a very large way. So my concern is that, these people move out here in the country because we like it. We're kind of independent, but dependent on each other. And now each corporation's coming in, putting in these large solar fields, Eversource is expanding there, and I don't know, I don't see the benefit to the town at all. I was a truck driver, I traveled all over 48 states, and I've seen what happens when commercial this or commercial that comes into an area. It's a beautiful area. 10 years down the line, it's a blight. It happened in Royal when they built the mall. I mean, so I don't want to see that happening to this town. But it seems like our hands are tied. We have to accept it. I know Westfield got a reprieve, Carver got a reprieve, but it's only for 12 months. So we want to work with you, but we want something back.
Right, and so we haven't had the opportunity to have those discussions. The pilot agreement, the numbers we shared are just an example from another location, another project. That is where, the town gets to have a, it's a negotiation of what does that look like? The property taxes that we're talking about, again, they tend to be helpful for communities. I can't speak whether or not that number is meaningful, and we can also do other things. So what does that look like? We're supporting the local fire staff, fire department. Again, we have not hammered that out, and that would be something we would love to start on, to really articulate those benefits for the local community. Go ahead.
Yeah, most corporations, and even when I was in business for myself, you don't start something without having a beginning and an ending. You don't move into an area without knowing exactly what you expect, what you're willing to pay. You have a high number, a low number, and that's what you're gonna work with. Eversource said they were looking at $64 million in expansion, part of it up at this substation. And what you,
So, north of 200 million for the size project that we are pushing. Emma, what number did you use in your calculation? 2 million. Yeah, so the cost is, we have not purchased the battery system yet, so there's some small fluctuation in costs over time. Actually, of late, more fluctuations in inflation, and we have tariffs, right? But hopefully, 200 million, so that is our number.
okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Welcome. Thank you, TJ.
Tara,
Yes.
Colleen, you, you're gonna have to play.
So, and that's good enough. So I was wondering if you have, because we're very unfamiliar with this here in Blanford. Do you have any information or statistics related to how the town's insurance coverage could potentially go up related to having something like this size?
There's no impact to the town's insurance that I'm aware of. We provide insurance for the project as part of the project, and we put in place a decommissioning bond. And I'm happy to provide a list of
Yeah,
towns
like,
that we call.
if I want to get an electric car and have a battery installed at my house, my homeowner's insurance is reflective of that. And since you're not incurring any of the operational expenses if something does go wrong, right, it's up to our fire department. I'm just curious. I mean, do we need to get different types of insurance for our firefighters? It just seems like a part that nothing's really done.
So, I'm just walking through insurance.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure.
Because we don't know, that's why we were asking.
Yeah, so the question, I'm actually not sure what to that question from, in a public hearing. I will walk through what we are planning to do, right, and then we can take that question and see if there's examples of that. We will have in place a decommissioning bond, with the town, that will be an allotted amount of money that is there, that is meant to, enforce various things that are conditions as part of the approval. There tends to be conditions around maintenance, around things like that, and also provides a fund to actually remove the system. And that is produced.
We're pretty familiar with the decommissioning bonds associated with solar.
And then,
But do you have to maintain insurance, your own insurance in that
Yes.
area? And does that cover reimbursement to our fire department if there is a fire? Does it, those
yes,
types of-
so, I thought you were saying, does the town need to get insurance?
We do need to get, the town will be affected, because I've done my own research, but I didn't know you had any statistical research since you work in this field. But what will your own insurance entail? Because you're a LLC, which means limited liability, and you're new to business, you're 3 years around. I'm sure you're all wonderful, knowledgeable people, but we're a really small town.
So we will have, this is a $200 million project that is extraordinarily capital intensive, although it is relatively small in size. With that, there are a number of interested parties in how that $200 million fares. And so project insurance is not a negotiable item for this project. What these projects do, there's an investment tax credit, which has been maintained through the Big Beautiful Bill, and that gets monetized by banks, just like banks that you might have your mortgages with and things like that, as part of the capital structure is what we call it. Those big banks, along with every other party that contributes to the capital stack for the project, care that the project does not, if there's an issue, they're fully covered.
I think
Yeah,
you
full
keep saying project, does project mean the duration of its lifespan?
Yes.
It does not mean the development.
Both. So when we're constructing the project, we have construction insurance.
Mhm.
After the project is operational, we have title insurance, and then we have insurance for the actual physical value, just like you would have for a car or a house, that has an insurance premium associated with it, a coverage limit, and that is there for, who knows what could happen. There could be a large event, storm or something. And so we have that in place for every project. That is absolute requirement. I'm happy to get you details.
That would be helpful, because I'm not trying to, not that I'm not trying to, but I'm not trying to only protect your assets. I'm trying to figure out if there's a catastrophic event, what's the town's recourse? I think it's important to consider, and I think shit. Although I personally will be greatly impacted when this whole thing is happening, I'm more worried about when you guys are all gone and what's gonna be happening. And Adam doesn't wanna get alerts. I don't wanna speak for Adam, but do we wanna get alerts for, air does this is venting? It sounds like it's gonna be our job to understand what might trigger an event that we need to be worried about. So we just wanna know that you guys, as part of whatever is in your operational after the project, covers catastrophic and potential
Yes.
reimbursement to the town.
Yes, so I think that if there is an event, it will cover the event in its entirety, including response. And I'm happy to get you follow-up on typical premiums that go into place.
That'd be helpful, really
Yep.
helpful.
That's an excellent question. That was his question. All right, so we really do want to have the audience ask a few questions, if you have questions that you'd like to ask. 1 second, just 1 second. I know there's a lot of questions. Listen, as you heard, and as we've listened to some of these questions, and I think, Colleen, your point, you started to talk business questions. These are the things that we have to really sit down and come up with the right set of questions, including that, and sit with these guys again and have more due diligence, because I feel like we're getting some of it, but not all of it, right? Your question of what's in it for Blandford, in my opinion, did not get answered. I heard we're gonna, it's gonna keep all our lights on. Well, all our lights are on, believe it or not, right? So that's not what's in it for Blandford. We're not gonna be talking money necessarily. I love his question about why did you pick Blandford?
So, I attempted to, so we picked Blandford because of the substation infrastructure, the 115 kV line, that it has available capacity in this part of Western Massachusetts. We spent over a year trying to find location for a project. There are a number of constraints in this part of the world. In terms of, this was not a deflecting what is in it for Blandford on the economic side, we have not had the opportunity to have those discussions. So,
As I told you earlier, it's not necessarily always about the money, right? Certainly, that's gonna be a discussion point and a very important one. We're not even here to make a decision how this town feels about what's happening here. That has to come first.
absolutely.
Can we do this? All right, go ahead.
So we will have people allow for some questions. I'm just gonna remind you, please come up to the microphone to ask your question and just state your name. And so I see Paul. It is, I just turned it on.
Oh, is it working?
Yeah.
Okay. As I understand how TJ feels, I also run not subscribing to this yet, this whole notion of losing many more acres. Losing part of what is Blandford, which is, our forests and fields and trees. So I'm also a new recruit for the zoning board in the town of Blandford, and part of my responsibility, which I take very seriously, was to download the new zoning board manual. And I have been reading it very intensely. I got to a whole chapter on battery energy storage systems, which really shocked me. And I kind of talked with our board director about it. But apparently, the state of Massachusetts, in their infinite wisdom, our legislators have deemed that battery energy storage systems are permitted in every city and state, city and town in Massachusetts, and they forced us to amend our zoning bylaws to allow it, which I was like, wow, you're kidding me. The problem with that is it adversely affects small towns like Blandford that have a lot of open space and other small communities that have a lot of open lands. I mean, I don't guess that you're probably going to Newton or Wellesley or Martha's Vineyard or even for that matter, Long Meadow to go install these projects. And it's troublesome to continually see our natural resources consumed for commercialism. And my question to you is, why aren't you looking at places like Munson State Hospital, which has thousands of acres, and is defunct? I mean, you've been plenty of best storage out there. How about the old Strathmore Mill, which has a lot of acres, and I almost think there's a little substation right out in front of it. Why do we have to lose our natural resources when we look at the number of defunct factory buildings there are in the inner city areas instead of defoliating all of our lands?
Well, so we look for the high voltage transmission grids and the substations. And there are relatively few spots to put these, that are acceptable. I actually looked at doing batteries, in some parts of Boston, next to some of the retiring generators that are out there. It is very, very difficult to find in a small slice of real estate to put these projects. So I think the point in many respects is true. These projects follow where you have high voltage transmission lines and you have substation infrastructure. On the, I think, concern about using more acreage or how this could expand, the substation has only so much capacity for projects. And so there is a limitation. There also is just a state limitation in terms of just how much is required to operate the grid. So that 5 gigawatt goal has come out of seeing a capacity shortfall. Well, it is not impacting you right now in terms of keeping your lights on. There are probably power impacts where they are coming in terms of prices, right? So there's supply and demand consideration. But this at the end of the day is a certain footprint, and there's only so much space in the substation to house this particular project and type of project. I had seen John Furman, I did not know.
My name is, can you hear me? My name is John Furman. This is kind of long, I've got exactly 2 minutes of writing. The band Van Halen put applause in their performance rider stating there will be no brown M&Ms in the backstage area upon pain of forfeiture of the show with full compensation. The request was actually a quick safety assessment. With heavy stage equipment, high-powered electronics, pyrotechnics, and large crowds, the brown M&M was a warning signal to see if the stagehands had been paying attention to each detail of the written contract to ensure the safety of the band, the crew, and the audience. Under due diligence in their own report, this organization can't even do their own due diligence as the section entitled consultation with lists Paul Martin as the planner for a town called Blandford with no deed. For a project that is basically saying, trust us, every detail matters, as one misstep can result in ecological, water quality, or human safety disaster. If we can't trust this organization to proofread the name of the town, I have a hard time trusting them building anything. Unexpected events happen. Accidents are not anticipated, like technology not allowing the slideshow to immediately work. We have a volunteer fire department that at any given time may not have anyone available, even if they're on call, especially if there's another emergency event already happening. My expectation for your company is that your insurance program will not have the ability to continue to cover your risk if they knew that information. And you really need to look at communities that can handle that kind of risk. I'd ask our select board to request a certificate of insurance from your company immediately.
Sorry, did you have a response or?
We don't have a project. We can provide, examples of project insurance. We don't have a project insurance policy yet because we have not gotten to that stage of development. But we can provide plenty of examples. We have a pro forma draft of that from the insurance company. We do not have a final policy. That can also be written into conditions of approval, as something that is required to be submitted and shared and memorialized. Gordon's question.
So I got a question, you're gonna be very good at explaining what you're gonna work with.
You have to get real close to the mic, sorry, Gordon.
You've been really good at explaining you're gonna help the fire department and other departments. Spoken to everybody. I have one question, when you have an emergency, fire department goes out there, where are they gonna get the water? Okay, so come we finish. So you try chucking it in, it's a small road to get it down if you want. The water stops at the second house, that's a 2-inch power line on. Second of all, that plant running efficiently at the max capacity today is 150,000 gallons. Okay, as it is right now, we have a major leak in some sections of this town. Everybody knows on North Street, Chester Road, we run out of water. So when you have a fire of that capacity over there, what do? Do we put it out and run out of water and people go without? Or do we let it burn? And what's it called, a runaway? It turns into a runaway issue. We have no fire capacity in this town right now. Our storage tank is down. We're in the process of getting everything going. But right now, put this in there and have a fire would be nothing but major catastrophe on a whole new level. Because if this system goes dry, pipes collapse. This is an old system, pipes over 100 years old. You drain the lines out of this, go extended through the time, and all of a sudden things come on the wrong way because they're drafting. It's a domino effect. So I want to know, where are you going to get the water for these fires? 16 million, that's what your slides are, or 6 million, that's what your slide show. What are you going to do when the plant only does 150,000 gallons a day?
I will, okay, and then I'll pass it to you. So that slide was there to illustrate in at the time where water was used to put out a fire. And the soil testing that then occurred after, that was the point of that slide. The current practice is you do not put water on top of these fires because that actually causes it to burn longer. It's called self-consumed, and so the battery filter self-consumes itself in the event of fire. We are required to have water on site available, and we use tanks, and that water is there for other purposes. If there was a fire in the area, maybe unrelated to our system, so we can have that water resource to fight vegetation and brush fire, right? So we do have water. We will have that stored in a tank on site. We will not have water as the mechanism to handle a fire event. I'm going to pass this over to folks.
Thank you. Sir, that was a great question, and one of the things that we work with the fire chief is moving forward in the planning process, because water is definitely something that we're going to need to utilize, and when we are utilizing it, it's utilized intermittently. So what will happen is utilizing a thermal imaging camera, we're gonna detect the temperature of the adjacent containers. So when we're applying water, it's just to cool that container. Once it gets cooled to a certain temperature, we're no longer going to apply water. As far as how much water, that's something that we'll discuss with the chief moving forward to see what he would feel comfortable with. But that is definitely in the design plan, because again, we operate in some places that don't have the availability to hydrants. But again, definitely a concern and something we will address. Yes, sir.
Can you maybe update the water department on this stuff, because.
Absolutely.
Yeah, from now, and you probably want to do it.
Absolutely. Sir, in the beard, yes. Oh, sorry.
Good evening, my name's Todd Schiff, I live on Chester Road, and we all know, yes, there's a question with water. Now, educate me, along with all the other people here that maybe know about it, maybe they don't, but the design of the lithium battery, water will not put out the fire, correct? So I worked in aviation in the Air Force for 20 some odd years, and we had certain metals on the aircraft that you couldn't put out with water. Whether it was beryllium brakes or depleted uranium, the counterbalance, the ailerons, or titanium, you need to have a foam system. Your containers sound like they don't really have any type of suppression system. Try to have more of just a venting system in your. The only way this spot to put these fires out, they have to put cells out. All you do is cool the perimeter, and you're hoping that it will burn down. Is there any, with the previous instances has there been a design flaw in the batteries that caused the incident? For the thermal runaway? Is any type of other suppression system being considered?
So I'll split the answer. I'll leave the technical side to the engineer. First and foremost, thank you for your service. I appreciate it. When we talk about suppression, we just kind of like to go back to that slide. When we put that cell that was on fire in the water, it's the pressure coming out of that cell that doesn't allow any type of suppression agent to get in there to stop that, to suppress that fire. So we let the fire continue to burn. So what it does is it's burning its own energy. So essentially, like I said, it's going into decay as the time goes on. And as far as your technology question with the batteries, I'll refer to the engineer because it's, unless you want me to follow up with something.
So the battery itself has to burn off its own energy.
Yes.
We wouldn't have any type of suppression system. The battery has to burn itself.
That's right.
How long does that take?
Sorry, if you have a question, could you stand up?
I mean, well, because we've seen on the news or social media or what's real or not nowadays, but some of these things have been burning for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time. Is it not containing and it's getting away, not being isolated?
So again, great question for duration, and this is something that we go into a detailed training with the fire department, but I'm happy to share. So when we look at duration, we look at what's called state of charge, and I kind of touched on it a little bit briefly in the presentation. And state of charge, that's going to determine the duration of the incident. So if you have a 90% state of charge of the battery, you're going to be looking at a longer term incident. If you have a 30% state of charge, it's a much shorter duration type of incident. There are other factors that we can't give you an exact time. The comparison would be, how long is a house fire burn? Well, that's depending on how much, is the house have any type of contents in it, or is it a vacant house? So again, I can give you an idea, utilizing data points to tell you how long the duration is. But as far as a concrete number, unfortunately, that I can't provide.
And I just want to add to the other part of your question. Battery fires occur either due to an electrical short or a chemical issue where there's overheating or physical damage to the battery. One of the reasons why that statistic I gave of there being 4 of these containerized fires in the last 5 or 6 years out of the thousands of containers that are out there. But because they're sitting in a field, in an arrangement where they're not really subject to any physical damage, that's why if you do the search on electrical or lithium-ion battery fires, most of what you're gonna see is vehicle fires. A lot of those are triggered by physical damage to the battery, either due to an accident or due to some sort of physical puncture in the battery. These are battery configurations that aren't really subject to that. So within the battery itself, there's all sorts of electrical management of when they start to see the battery in an off-normal condition, they shut it down. At least once a year, my iPhone shuts down on me because it gets overheated. I left it in the car or something like that. That's the thermal management system on the iPhone. And it's similar to things like that. So the whole design of the system is to eliminate the potential for those fires. When and if a fire does occur, there's all sorts of testing that's been done at the cell level to see how it propagates, then at the unit level. UL 9540A is the underwriter's lab's requirement. They're an independent testing lab. They do your ceiling fan to your roofs, right? And they have a number of different requirements that have been developed to make sure that these events don't take off and consume the entire container. So in some instances, even if you let it go and didn't put any water on it, the fire won't even propagate to the entire container. They're limited to a cell or a rack, and they stay local within the container. In some cases, they will take off and be allowed to burn out, but again, will only involve one container.
And it sounds like in these containers, there's numerous sub-sources, right?
Yes.
And they're all individually monitored, or is it like a cluster pack, or each individual?
Yeah, there's monitors at the module level. So a module may have a dozen batteries, pouch batteries within the monitor. They're monitored down to that level. Manage the temperature accordingly.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah, just reading your article that was in Country Journal, you have a thermal runaway. To control it, you have a lithium iron phosphate chemical composition. All right, the word phosphate scares me because isn't that used in gunpowder? Isn't that what they used at the Oklahoma bombing? They used phosphate galvanode in an ignition system. I mean, you gotta clear my mind with that. You know, they say a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. I'm living proof, so.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I too am not going to speak outside of what I know about the battery composition. I mean, I'm not a battery engineer, but our company's done a lot of the fire testing itself. What I can tell you is that the off gases when thermal runaway does happen, it's mostly CO, mostly CO2, a small amount of other types of gases that within a small distance away from the battery that's the container that's on fire are well below EPA, state, and other limits of being a toxicity concern. The vast majority of that white smoke that you see coming off the battery when it's on fire is CO2.
And not hydrogen.
Hydrogen is actually, that is the third component, and that's actually what will cause, if there is a buildup of a gas within that closed container, that's actually the explosive component that causes the explosive events to go, is the hydrogen component.
Yeah, now, hydrogen, to my knowledge, is a fast evaporated gas. When I used to deliver it, we used to do it in a liquid form, which I didn't have done. But in a gaseous form, it's far more dangerous. And you have 3 different forms of hydrogen coming out of this supposed fire. And with the phosphate in that, I mean, it leaves a lot of questions in my mind. You know, you're not going to put water on it. You're creating your own oxygen. And what's the answer?
Yeah, so I think the question for me, and this is something we have to get back to, is the phosphate is a component of the battery of what that turns into as far as a product of the venting. It's not gonna be just phosphated itself, it's gonna be another component, and I just don't have that answer chemically off the top of my head, but we can get that answer for you. What does that component of the battery liquid itself turn into that is of concern? Okay, and I don't know that answer off the top of my head, because it's mostly CO2.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, that guy is.
This is Brian Young. I'd like to know the country of origin. I'd like to know what the country of origin is of nation batteries, and I'd also like to know who the parent company is.
So at Mission Clean Energy, there is no parent company above Mission Clean Energy. We have investment from Walfra, which is a private equity company that invests in pension funds in the United States and elsewhere. They're using this project of this company to invest in those pension funds.
So what's the country of origin for the maker of the battery?
Great question. So the battery components are coming from various places. So what was that?
Such as?
Such as China, South Korea, many.
I'm sorry, can we please speak like people speak?
So there is an attempt here in the United States to get local manufacturing of batteries off the ground. There are a number of battery plants in Georgia that have started, that are operational today. We expect in the future to be able to procure more of the batteries here in the United States. That is definitely a policy objective from the last administration and the current administration. Today, there is not a local supply of batteries of sufficient nature in the United States. And then on top of that, the components that go into one of these containers, including the lithium, come from all over the world, including your cell phones, right? So there is an attempt to try and have more of this resource here in the United States to support local manufacturing, but not every component is coming from the US, especially some of the raw materials that go into a battery, right, which consists of lithium, steel, and plastic. And so here in the US, we have somewhat limited resource that we're presently mining for along all of those lines.
Are you federally controlled?
No, we're not federally controlled.
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. Are you buying or leasing the land for this again?
Emma, this is a lease option. It's a lease option, yeah.
It's gonna be a lease?
Yep.
So if he decides to change his mind, it's not, the state's just gonna walk in and say, you got somebody, you know, you can do it anyway.
I'm sorry, the question is if he changes his mind about leasing the property. So the agreement that we have in place is an option to lease, what it's called. And that is already an agreement to lease that premise for this purpose, only this purpose, not other purposes.
So he can't change his mind.
During the option period, that is the construct of the agreement, yes, he can't change his mind at this point.
So we're making some money, what we're doing here.
In terms of the use of the property for the battery premise, for the batteries, that piece is under an option agreement for that. The landowner, and I can't disclose too many details because there's actually confidential provisions in there. And you're welcome, I'm sure, to speak, to the, I'm giving you the high level, but I don't want to go into the details.
Question for finance. Yes, sir. What town are you from? What town are you from?
Marlboro Township?
Do you have one of these facilities there?
I do not.
How come?
I don't live by the grid.
Are you paid by these people to be a spokesman, or is this just something you know out of the kindness of your heart?
I'm a consultant.
Okay, so you're paid.
Yes.
Can I just make a quick statement on that? We were, our first engagement with this company was about a week and a half ago. we are industry experts on batteries and safety associated with batteries, so we get called on by a lot of companies to come speak with us. There isn't enough money in the world to pay either of us to say something that we don't believe is safe.
I wasn't.
No, this is a funny anecdote. I come from Taunton, Massachusetts. I was there visiting family. I was reminded of a story. I went to WPI as a fire protection engineer, and they asked me if I still don't buy real Christmas trees. And I said, yeah, that's absolutely the case, because in college I saw a video of what happens when a Christmas tree goes up, and I've been using fake Christmas trees ever since. If we felt it wasn't safe, we wouldn't support it, and we would tell them so.
So, places like Stockbridge, Massachusetts, Lennox, all those lovely places out there, beautiful, in the Berkshires. Are you looking to expand well to those places, or are you just looking to go over?
So in terms of mission and the batteries, we are developing, we have 2 batteries in this state that we're working on. This project and one other project, I'll let Emma mention the location of the other. There are batteries being planned throughout the state. We're not the only developers responding to the overall need that has been projected of the 5 gigawatt desire for batteries. So at the state level, that has been put out there. So we're not the only developer looking for locations. So I can't speak to those other locations and whether batteries will come there or not.
We'll go back to TJ's question.
Okay, so this is the last question.
Last question. We'll go back to TJ's question. Why Blandford, when you have places like Springfield, Holyoke, Pittsfield, all these other places that have substations, parts of their town are just barren. There's nothing there. Why can't you put this stuff there instead of trying to destroy the beauty of this place here?
So certainly the intent wasn't to destroy the beauty of the local vicinity.
So this is a hunting, fishing, bedroom community, and you're not gonna be in those solar fields anymore. You're not gonna be where batteries are, you know, and why in the middle of nowhere? Or this is
So
the
I'm sorry, that was
dump.
the last one. It's been for a long time. It's going to be one of them. So Karen asked the next question.
Okay, thank you. Good answer.
So as far as the battery is concerned, I know there's a problem with the lithium-ion phosphate batteries. Sorry, dendrite formations. So basically that's when one side of the battery touches the other side of the battery, and it's spontaneous combustion. So you can find that, you detect that. What is the plan for that? First, the IT system that you're putting the security function to this. What's stopping anybody else from putting what kind of system are you actually putting in? Because putting this in, why would you have it? So anybody can just show up. And then the hydrogen fluoride gas, if there was a fire, how are you containing it? Coming from 30 parts per million is enough to kill something, right? So how far does that spread?
So I'm going to defer fire questions. I'll take these items.
So in reference to the gases, we see that the gases rise and dissipate, and when we talk response, again, our thought theory is, I want the safest response for the men and women of your agency. I'm not asking them to get within 100 feet. So when they go to a house fire and they have to run into that's dangerous. In a response like this, I want them at least 100 feet away. So as far as distance, the gases will rise and dissipate. We'll conduct some air monitoring. Again, we're not seeing anything to go outside of the gates to those facilities. Again, it's something we're going to monitor for sure for safety of the members in the community. But that's typically the response thought process. So, at close levels, it could be harmful, but we're not getting to those distances. Then as far as the cybersecurity, I'm going to just turn it back over unless you need to further expansion.
Yeah. Yeah, you asked a question about HF and HCl. Those are 2 actually reported substances that can come off of a battery fire. There's all other things at play that are heavier in the air that played out. In all of the events that actually happened, there's been no reported incidents of HCL or HF extending offsite of anything of concern. And actually, the company is doing independently a phase 2 study for ACP to look at this in computer modeling and to try and predict the extent of that and, you know, what distance HF and HCL might be a concern. But it hasn't been measured to date in any instances of that.
Yeah, we have a slide on this, but just at a basic level, I want to list the specific things correctly that we comply with, and it's a little bit of the mouthy set of regulations and certifications. So this particular project is a significant investment. We want to protect it. We want to protect the community. We have similar protocols that utilities are using for their own infrastructure in terms of cybersecurity. So that includes the ISO information security, cyber security, privacy code. We comply with NIST, NERC, CIP, and SSC, data management, processing, and confidentiality. There are 4 or 5 things that we have to do on cybersecurity. That alone is probably its own presentation, which we're happy to do. In the meantime, we can share the codes that we comply with on the cybersecurity side. It's an excellent question, and definitely something that is front of mind for developers, anyone connected to the grid infrastructure. It's a growing concern, a really valuable. So,
sorry, I guess the question really is what is the strategy that we're implementing to verify that whoever has access to the system is supposed to have access to it? I get all the code, but you know, what's the strategy?
So when we're starting up the system, we're making sure that there's no unauthorized use. We're scanning all of the software for signs of someone trying to hack in and do something with it. I'm sorry, I'm trying to turn to, but it's difficult with the mic. I'm sort of facing the same people all night. It's probably tired to see my face. But I think, sir, I prefer to just follow up with more detail. I'm happy to give you my charge, and then we can include it. We would like to do an open house to continue to address concerns, and we can bring that as a particular topic that we get into.
John, before you go again, there's a gentleman back here, or sorry. Yes.
Question for the teams over here from the Lorax. You mentioned the transfer station. Well, I own 50 acres right into that, the woods, the fields, the 14 up to that wetlands. That's been determined by years ago by wanting to do solar. Also wetlands into my woods. I walk those all the time with my dogs, winter, summer. So, and we also have endangered wildlife species there. Why not there? What time of year did you do your walkthrough with wildlife conservation? Because that makes a big difference.
So Emma will address the time of year in which we did the study. Just to give you a broader picture on what we do with the studies. We do an initial study where we do boots on the ground. We look for various species and habitat for species. We also, to comply with the Endangered Species Act, and there are specific portions of that around what's called the take of species. If we have nesting birds that are in the region, that are known to be in the region, we have to do a pre-construction survey much closer to construction. And we tend to try and avoid those periods of time for our start of construction.
Throughout the woods, bats are throughout the woods. And I know they had to stop them. They couldn't even go through there, and I see them all the time. And one particular species is endangered, and that's wetlands back there. I don't even use that for hay, and we do hay on another property. It's wetlands that comes right to the transfer station. Those power lines run through my property. Trust me, 100 companies have contacted me about battery storage, solar. I say, no, I didn't move here to have that. Put it in Marlboro.
So, we are avoiding the wetland areas in our current site design. So that
There are all wetlands down there. Have you walked through there?
we have walked through there, we hired, we work with a wetland biologist consultant who has to make a determination following the state, there's a wetland classification in the state, and there's also the national wetland classification. They perform their survey in accordance with that. They look at the type of soil, they look at physical signs around the site, and they did a full wetland delineation. And the majority of this area, you're correct, is a wetland.
Did
And
you
we're not
include our conservation people? Because prior to that, when they walked through, and I've had to walk through many times for other projects we're looking at, and I said no, all of them, but it was always never for our team.
We will. When they come to us, we will. They haven't
So-
presented, we've just gotten the same deck, similar deck, so.
So we will absolutely have the site, and we can have our wetlands, specialists and biologists there to walk through, the site.
And we're gonna do two more, and then we still actually. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna just speak to that. So there are certain times of year that we actually are even able to do the studies because it's when those species would be most likely to occur. So this field assessment for habitat and species was conducted in the summer, August of last year. We also conducted a wetland delineation in fall of that year and then followed up again in May. May is actually a specific window when you can't go out in December in the middle of winter to explore your pools, right? We have to go during very specific windows of time, so that's when we went. We didn't find any vernal pool significance. I think also specificity is really, really important here. The siting is really done with like a scalpel. There are wetlands in this area, right? It's wet. I've been on the property many times. Our specific project site and the impact of our project boundary is not impacting any of those wetlands that were delineated by an expert consultant that we use, that people use throughout the area to delineate wetlands specifically for this purpose, development. And there are different types of wetlands, right? And we're meeting all the requirements set under the Water Protection Act, and we're gonna work with Conservation Commission, for our order conditions, but some of the setbacks include a 200-foot buffer from perennial streams, we have a 100-foot buffer away from, bordered vegetated wetlands. It's different from, these kind of smaller isolated wetlands, and we're below the threshold impacts, that were set, we're all in compliance for. So yeah, I think that hopefully answers your question on wetlands.
Thank you. Richard, had a question today?
Just first. Was this the person?
I wasn't sure. I was being upset.
The specific presentation here, we might use parts of it. I am not quite sure the kind of the nature of the considerations are a little bit different at that level. They are absolutely aware of the project. Is there a specific concern?
You know what you get out of it. You know, got an idea of the point. And then you get out of the deal. Considering that one of the watershed is worth at least $1 million. What is the potential? What kind of guarantees?
So we discussed the decommissioning bond as well as the project insurance follow-up, which we will do with the individuals here.
Could you repeat the answer?
Oh, sorry, could you repeat the answer?
So there were two questions there. I think one was around.
One was a comment, and one was a question, he said.
Okay, I'm trying my best to follow what you would like me to respond to. The town of Blandford, we will work with the town on the property tax agreement that provides benefits to the local town. We'll work on an agreement with the fire department for services. That's the answer on sort of that side of it. The project also keeps the lights on, and then I think you added project insurance, and that is something we're gonna follow up on and have in place for all of our projects. That is true, and that is why we are co-authoring agreement. We've also done other things in other places with various ways we can benefit communities, so we're open to discussion at that point. We've not had the opportunity yet to have those kinds of in-depth conversations, and we welcome them.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, so it looks like we're done with questions for now. I just wanted to let you know that Mission Clean Energy, as we've discussed, is going to be, we're going to be working with them on time to come back with an open house style, where more of your questions can be asked and answered, sort of one-on-one, smaller formats. But in the interest of time, we do have other business as the select board, so we do want to move on. So this will be, like I said, it's recorded, it was posted. I just ask that when you make your way out, do so quietly and have your conversations. We're at